The boardroom was silent except for the soft hum of the air conditioning and the hammering of Ethan Cole's heart. He stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, his reflection staring back, a man who'd forgotten how to hope. Then she moved. Victoria Lane, CEO of Lane Enterprises, crossed the polished marble floor with measured steps. She didn't speak. She simply reached up and straightened his tie with hands that trembled almost imperceptibly. Their eyes met. In that moment, something dormant awakened in Ethan's chest, a feeling he'd buried 3 years ago beneath grief so profound it had reshaped him. This wasn't just an interview anymore. This was the beginning of everything changing. If you're ready to follow Ethan and Victoria's journey from that single transformative moment to a love neither of them saw coming, stay with me until the very end. And please, hit that like button and drop a comment with the city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel, connecting hearts across the miles. The morning had started like every other morning for the past 3 years, with Maya's small voice cutting through the darkness of Ethan Cole's bedroom. "Daddy? Are you awake?" Ethan opened his eyes to find his 7-year-old daughter standing beside his bed, her brown curls tangled from sleep, clutching the stuffed rabbit she'd had since she was 2. The rabbit was missing an ear now, worn thin from constant holding during the nights when nightmares came. "I'm awake, sweetheart," he said, his voice rough. He reached out and pulled her onto the bed, feeling the familiar weight of her against his chest. "Did you sleep okay?" Maya nodded, but her fingers twisted in the fabric of his old t-shirt. "I had the dream again." Ethan's heart clenched. He knew which dream. The one where she called for her mother and nobody answered. The one where she woke up crying, searching for a voice that would never come again. "I'm here," he whispered into her hair. "I'm right here, Maya. Always." They lay there together as the pale morning light crept through the cheap blinds of their small apartment. Ethan counted the cracks in the ceiling, 37, he'd memorized them all during sleepless nights, and tried not to think about the interview scheduled for 10 o'clock. Lane Enterprises, senior financial analyst position. It was 3 levels above anything he was qualified for, but desperation had made him bold when he submitted the application. "Daddy?" Maya's voice was muffled against his chest. "Are you going to get the job today?" "I don't know, baby, but I'm going to try my very best. Mrs. Chen says you're the smartest person she knows." Ethan smiled despite himself. Mrs. Chen was their neighbor, a widow in her 70s who watched Maya when Ethan had interviews or when he picked up late shifts at the warehouse. She'd probably said that to make Maya feel better, but the kindness still touched him. "Mrs. Chen is very generous," he said. "Come on, let's get you ready for school." The routine was familiar, comforting in its predictability. Breakfast. Oatmeal with brown sugar because it was cheap and filling. Maya's backpack checked 3 times because she had a tendency to forget her homework. The walk to the bus stop took 12 minutes, and Ethan used every second to memorize her face, the way she skipped over cracks in the sidewalk, the sound of her laugh when she told him about the art project they were starting in class. "I'm going to paint you," she announced. "Ms. Rodriguez said we should paint someone we love." "I'm honored," Ethan said, crouching down as the school bus rounded the corner. "You're going to do great today, okay? And tonight, we'll have pancakes for dinner to celebrate." "Celebrate what?" "Whatever happens. We always have something to celebrate." Maya hugged him tight, her small arms fierce around his neck. "Good luck, Daddy. I love you." "I love you more than all the stars in the sky," he said, their ritual phrase. He watched her climb onto the bus, waved until it disappeared around the corner, then turned and began the long walk home to prepare. The interview was at 10, but Ethan started getting ready at 7:30. He'd learned early that preparation was the only control he had over an uncontrollable world. He showered in the lukewarm water their building provided, shaved carefully around the scar on his jaw, a reminder of the accident that had taken Sarah, and stood before his closet with a familiar sense of inadequacy. One suit. That's what he owned. It was 4 years old, purchased for Sarah's funeral, worn to every interview since. The fabric was starting to shine at the elbows, and the pants were a bit loose now. He'd lost weight over the past year, too busy surviving to remember to eat properly, but it was clean and pressed. The tie was the problem. It was a gift from Sarah, given to him on their 5th anniversary, navy blue with thin silver stripes. He'd worn it only once before she died. Now he couldn't seem to make the knot work right. His hands shook as he tried again and again, each failed attempt making his chest tighter. "Get it together," he whispered to his reflection. "You can do this." But could he? The position at Lane Enterprises was far beyond his current credentials. He'd been piecing together his life with warehouse shifts and freelance bookkeeping, nothing that would impress a Fortune 500 company. The only reason he'd gotten the interview was because his former professor, Dr. Morrison, had personally recommended him to someone in Lane's HR department. "Ethan Cole is the most naturally gifted analyst I've taught in 20 years," Dr. Morrison had written in the recommendation letter he'd shown Ethan. "His circumstances have prevented him from reaching his full potential, but given the opportunity, he will exceed every expectation." Ethan wished he had even half that confidence in himself. The tie still wouldn't cooperate. He left it hanging loose and grabbed his worn leather messenger bag, another artifact from his previous life, when he'd been a graduate student with dreams of working in corporate finance. Inside was a folder with copies of his resume, letters of recommendation, and a portfolio of financial analyses he'd completed during his brief stint at a small accounting firm before Maya was born. The subway ride to downtown took 40 minutes. Ethan spent it reviewing notes he'd made about Lane Enterprises, a privately held investment firm specializing in sustainable development projects, founded 15 years ago by Victoria Lane after she left a prestigious position at Goldman Sachs. The company had a reputation for aggressive growth tempered by unusual ethical standards. They'd turned down lucrative deals over environmental concerns. They paid their employees well above market rate. And Victoria Lane herself was something of an enigma, rarely photographed, never interviewed, known only through the company's results. Ethan exited the subway at Broad Street and stood for a moment, staring up at the gleaming tower that housed Lane Enterprises. 37 floors of glass and steel, reflecting the morning sun like a beacon. He felt absurdly small standing before it. "You've got this," he whispered to himself, then walked through the revolving doors into the cathedral-like lobby. The security guard checked his ID and directed him to the 28th floor. The elevator was all glass and chrome, rising smoothly while offering a vertiginous view of the city spreading out below. Ethan focused on his breathing, in for 4 counts, hold for 4, out for 4, the technique his grief counselor had taught him for managing anxiety. The elevator chimed. The doors opened onto a reception area that looked like it belonged in a modern art museum. Everything was clean lines and subtle lighting, expensive without being ostentatious. Behind a curved desk sat a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and silver hair pulled back in an elegant knot. "You must be Ethan Cole," she said warmly. "I'm Margaret. Welcome to Lane Enterprises." "Thank you," Ethan managed, struck by the genuine warmth in her greeting. He'd expected corporate coldness, practiced professionalism. This felt different. "You're a bit early, which is perfect. Can I get you some water? Coffee?" "Water would be great, thank you." She returned with a glass of water in crystal that probably cost more than his monthly grocery budget, along with a warm smile. "The panel should be ready for you in about 10 minutes. Try to relax. You're going to do wonderfully." Ethan wanted to ask her how she could possibly know that, but instead he just nodded and took a seat in one of the impossibly comfortable chairs that lined the waiting area. He sipped the water and tried not to catastrophize. This was just an interview. The worst thing that could happen was rejection, and he was intimately familiar with that particular pain. The minutes crawled. Ethan watched other employees move through the space. Everyone seemed purposeful but not rushed, engaged but not stressed. There was something in the culture here, something he couldn't quite name but could feel in the air. People said good morning to each other and seemed to mean it. "Mr. Cole?" Margaret's voice pulled him from his observations. "They're ready for you now, conference room B, just down this hallway on your left." Ethan stood, straightened his jacket, and remembered too late that his tie was probably still askew. He reached up to check it as he walked, but before he could fix it, he found himself standing before a glass door with conference room B etched into its surface. He could see them inside. 3 people seated at a long table, 2 men in their 40s reviewing documents, and her, Victoria Lane. Ethan recognized her from the single professional photo on the company website, but that image had failed to capture the presence she commanded even sitting still. She was reading something on a tablet, a slight frown of concentration on her face. Her dark hair was pulled back, revealing sharp cheekbones and a jawline that spoke of strength. She wore a charcoal gray suit that was tailored perfectly, elegant without being flashy. Ethan's hand was on the door handle when he remembered Dr. Morrison's final piece of advice. Be honest, Victoria Lane has a legendary ability to detect bullshit. Don't try to be who you think they want. Be exactly who you are. He took one more breath and opened the door. All three of them looked up. The two men smiled politely. Victoria's expression was harder to read, assessing, intelligent, giving nothing away. Mr. Cole, one of the men said, standing and extending his hand. James Torres, Director of Operations. This is Marcus Webb, Senior VP of Finance. And this is Victoria Lane, Ethan said, and was surprised when she also stood, offering her hand. A pleasure to meet you, Mr. Cole, she said. Her voice was lower than he'd expected, with a hint of something that might have been amusement. Please, have a seat. Ethan shook her hand. Firm grip, warm skin, brief contact, and moved to the chair across from them. He set his messenger bag on the floor and tried to remember how to sit like a competent professional rather than a man whose life was held together with duct tape and determination. Thank you for meeting with us, Marcus said, opening the folder in front of him. Dr. Morrison spoke very highly of you. We've reviewed your resume and your portfolio, and I have to say, your analytical work is impressive. The Coastal Development Project analysis in particular showed sophisticated understanding of risk assessment. Thank you, Ethan said. That was a theoretical model I developed for Dr. Morrison's seminar on sustainable finance. I was exploring how traditional risk metrics often fail to account for long-term environmental impact. What made you interested in that particular angle? Victoria asked. It was the first time she'd spoken beyond the greeting, and Ethan found himself looking directly at her. Personal experience, he said honestly. I grew up in a town that prioritized short-term economic gain over environmental stewardship. By the time I was in high school, the river was toxic, the air quality was dangerous, and the promised jobs had dried up anyway. I watched my community pay the price for someone else's profit. It made me want to find a better way, one where financial success and ethical responsibility weren't mutually exclusive. Something shifted in Victoria's expression. Not quite a smile, but a softening around her eyes that suggested his answer had landed differently than he'd expected. James leaned forward. Your resume shows a gap of 3 years. Can you tell us about that? This was it. The moment where he could craft a careful story, minimize the truth, present the version of himself that seemed most employable. Ethan thought of Dr. Morrison's advice and decided to gamble on honesty. 3 years ago, my wife died in a car accident, he said simply. We have a daughter, Maya. She's 7 now. After Sarah's death, I had to make some hard choices about how to rebuild our lives. I couldn't pursue the career path I'd planned because I needed to be present for Maya. So I've been working warehouse shifts and doing freelance bookkeeping, jobs with flexible hours that let me be there when she needs me. It's not the trajectory I imagined, but it's kept us afloat. The room was quiet. Ethan couldn't read their reactions and didn't try. He'd said what was true. That must have been incredibly difficult, Victoria said softly. There was something in her tone that made Ethan look at her again, and for a moment he saw past the CEO exterior to something raw underneath. How did you manage the grief while caring for a young child? Honestly? Ethan gave a short laugh that held no humor. I didn't manage it well. I just survived it. 1 day at a time, sometimes 1 hour at a time. Maya needed me to function, so I functioned. The grief is still there. I've just learned to carry it differently. Marcus glanced at Victoria, some silent communication passing between them. Then he looked back at Ethan. The position we're filling requires someone who can handle high-pressure situations, manage complex financial models, and work collaboratively across departments. Based on your academic record, you clearly have the technical skills, but you've been out of the corporate environment for a while. What makes you think you can handle the demands of this role? Ethan felt his spine straighten. This he could answer. With respect, Mr. Webb, I've spent the last 3 years managing pressure that makes corporate deadlines look simple. I've balanced budgets that had no room for error while my daughter was waiting for dinner. I've solved problems with no resources and no backup. I've made decisions alone that affected another human being's well-being. I've done financial modeling at midnight after working a 10-hour shift because I refuse to let my skills atrophy. The question isn't whether I can handle the demands. The question is whether you're willing to see past my circumstances to what I can actually do. The words came out with more force than he'd intended, but Ethan didn't regret them. He was tired of apologizing for survival. Victoria's lips curved into what was definitely a smile now. "Show us," she said. "I'm sorry?" She turned her tablet around, showing him a complex spreadsheet. "This is a real project we're considering, a mixed-use development in Portland that's designed to revitalize a former industrial site. We've got environmental remediation costs, tax incentive structures, projected revenue streams, and community impact assessments. Walk us through how you'd evaluate whether this is a sound investment." Ethan felt something click into place. This he knew. This was the language he spoke fluently, even after years away. He pulled his chair closer and began to examine the data, his mind already sorting through the variables. "First thing I notice is the timeline," he said. "You've got a 5-year projection here, but environmental remediation on industrial sites often takes longer than initially estimated, especially if you find unexpected contamination. I'd want to build in contingency time, maybe 18 to 24 additional months, and account for the carrying costs during that period." He scrolled through more data, his confidence growing. The tax incentive structure is aggressive, which is good, but it's also dependent on hitting specific job creation targets. I'd want to stress test this model against scenarios where you only achieve 60% or 75% of those targets. What's the break-even point? At what threshold does the project go from viable to problematic? "What about the community impact piece?" James asked. "How do you factor that into financial analysis?" "You quantify what you can and acknowledge what you can't," Ethan said. "Displacement of existing residents has a cost, both ethical and practical. If you push people out, you create resentment that can manifest in regulatory challenges, public opposition, and increased political risk. All of that affects your timeline and your budget. But there's also a qualitative component. What's the value of doing something that genuinely improves people's lives? That's harder to put in a spreadsheet, but it matters for long-term sustainability." He looked up to find all three of them watching him intently. Victoria was leaning back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. "You've got a contamination buffer built in here," Ethan continued, pointing to a line item. "But it's based on preliminary site assessments. I'd recommend bringing in a third-party environmental engineer before you commit. The difference between moderate and severe contamination could swing this project from a 12% return to a loss. It's worth the upfront cost for certainty." "What would you do about the revenue projections for the retail component?" Marcus asked. "They're based on current market rates for the area." "Which is a problem if you're trying to revitalize a neighborhood," Ethan said. "Current rates reflect current conditions, which presumably aren't great if revitalization is needed. I'd look at comparable projects in similar markets. What happened to retail rates 3 to 5 years after completion in those cases? That gives you a better trajectory model. Also, you might consider anchor tenant strategy. Lock in a few key businesses at slightly reduced rates to establish credibility, then use that to command market rates for remaining spaces." They talked through the project for another 20 minutes, Ethan fielding questions, offering analysis, occasionally challenging assumptions in the data. He forgot to be nervous. This was what he was good at, seeing patterns in numbers, understanding the human elements that drove financial outcomes, finding the elegant solution in complex problems. When they finally paused, Ethan realized his tie was definitely crooked and he probably looked disheveled, but he didn't care. He'd shown them what they'd asked to see. "That was impressive," James said, and he sounded like he meant it. "Very impressive," Marcus agreed. "Your analytical instincts are sharp, and your ability to contextualize financial data within broader social impact is exactly what we're looking for." Victoria had been quiet during the last exchange. Now she stood, and Ethan automatically stood as well. She walked around the table, and Ethan felt his pulse kick up without understanding why. "May I?" she asked, gesturing toward his tie. Ethan blinked, confused. "I'm sorry?" Your tie, she said gently. It's crooked. May I fix it? He nodded, unable to form words. Victoria stepped closer, close enough that he could smell her perfume, something subtle and expensive, and reached up to straighten his tie. Her fingers were deft, efficient, and Ethan found himself frozen, staring at a point just past her shoulder because looking directly at her felt too intense. There, she said softly, smoothing the fabric down. Much better. Her hands lingered for just a fraction of a second longer than necessary. Then she stepped back, and Ethan could breathe again. Thank you, he managed. Victoria's eyes held his, and something unspoken passed between them. Recognition, perhaps, or simply acknowledgement of a moment that shouldn't have felt significant, but somehow did. We'll be in touch, Mr. Cole, she said. Soon, I'll say. Ethan left the building in a daze. He made it 3 blocks before he had to stop and sit on a bench, his hands shaking with adrenaline crash. The interview had gone well, better than well, if he was being honest. They'd been impressed with his analysis. They'd engaged with his ideas. Marcus and James had practically telegraphed approval, but none of that was what had his heart racing. Victoria Lane had fixed his tie. It was such a small gesture. Meaningless, really. The kind of thing someone might do for a colleague or friend without thinking twice. Except it hadn't felt meaningless. It had felt intimate in a way that made no sense, a breach of the professional distance that should have existed between them. Ethan pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes and tried to calm down. He was reading too much into a kind gesture from a woman who probably just had an eye for detail and a habit of fixing things that were out of place. It meant nothing, except her hands had been warm, and she'd looked at him like she saw something beneath the surface. And for the first time in 3 years, Ethan had felt something other than numb grief when someone touched him. His phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Chen. Maya's at my place. I picked her up from the bus. No rush coming home. How did it go? Ethan smiled despite his confusion. Mrs. Chen had probably bribed Maya with cookies to extend the play date. It went well, he texted back. Really well. I'll be there in an hour. Thank you. He had an hour to himself, an hour to sit on this bench and watch the city move around him, an hour to think about what came next. If he got this job, and something in Victoria's expression suggested he might, everything would change. Financial stability, health insurance for Maya, the ability to stop living month to month, a career path that actually used his education, but also working for a woman who had somehow shaken something loose inside him with a simple touch. Being in proximity to whatever that feeling was, day after day. Learning to navigate professional boundaries when he'd forgotten how to navigate anything beyond basic survival. Ethan thought about Sarah. 3 years, and he could still see her face clearly. The way she'd laughed at his terrible jokes, the fierce intelligence in her eyes, the softness of her hand in his. He'd loved her with everything he had, and when she died, he'd assumed that part of him died too. He'd made his peace with that. He was a father now, not a husband. Maya was his world. Romance, attraction, connection. Those were luxuries from a previous life that no longer applied. Except Victoria Lane had fixed his tie, and for 30 seconds, Ethan Cole had felt devastatingly, terrifyingly alive. Maya was covered in paint when Ethan arrived at Mrs. Chen's apartment. We had an art emergency, Mrs. Chen explained, her eyes twinkling. Maya couldn't wait to start her painting. Daddy! Maya ran to him, leaving small paint footprints on Mrs. Chen's kitchen floor. Look what I made. She held up a piece of paper that showed a figure in a suit, presumably Ethan, surrounded by what appeared to be stars, or maybe flowers. The interpretation was generous. It's beautiful, Ethan said, crouching down to her level. Tell me about it. This is you being brave at your interview, Maya said seriously, and these are all the good things that are going to happen because you were brave. Ethan felt his throat tighten. How do you know I was brave? Because you're always brave, Daddy, even when you're scared. He pulled her into a hug, not caring about the paint transferring to his suit. I love you, Maya Bear. Love you more than all the stars in the sky, she recited, then pulled back to look at him seriously. Did you get the job? I don't know yet, but I think it went really well. When will you know? Soon, they said. We have to be patient. I'm not good at patient, Maya said, and Ethan laughed because it was absolutely true. They thanked Mrs. Chen, who refused Ethan's offer to help clean the paint, and walked home through the late afternoon light. Maya talked non-stop about her day, the art project, the story her teacher had read, the game at recess where she'd been the dragon. Ethan listened, asked questions, and tried to stay present instead of replaying every moment of the interview. That night, after pancakes and a bath and 2 stories, Maya finally fell asleep. Ethan sat in the living room of their small apartment, staring at his phone like he could will it to ring. It didn't, of course. Professional hiring processes took time, he knew that. But 3 days later, when his phone finally did ring, and Margaret's warm voice said, "Mr. Cole, Victoria would like to speak with you," Ethan's world shifted on its axis once again. "Mr. Cole," Victoria's voice came through clear and composed. "I wanted to let you know personally that we'd like to offer you the position. The formal offer letter will come through HR, but I wanted to tell you first. Your interview was exceptional. We're all very excited at the prospect of having you join our team." Ethan had imagined this moment 100 times over the past 3 days. In his imagination, he'd been smooth, professional, appropriately grateful. In reality, he had to sit down because his knees went weak. "Thank you," he said, his voice rougher than intended. This is incredible. Thank you so much." "The thanks isn't necessary. You earned this on merit." There was a pause, then Victoria continued in a tone that was somehow both professional and personal. "I know taking this position will require adjustments. If you need flexibility around your daughter's schedule, we can work something out. We value the whole person here, Mr. Cole, not just the analyst." The kindness in that statement nearly undid him. "I appreciate that more than I can say." "Welcome to Lane Enterprises, Ethan. I'll see you Monday." She hung up and Ethan sat in his quiet apartment, holding a phone that had just delivered a future he'd stopped believing in. Then he stood up and walked to Maya's room. She was asleep, curled around her worn rabbit, her face peaceful in the dimness. Ethan knelt beside her bed and whispered into the darkness, "We're going to be okay, baby girl. We're finally going to be okay." And for the first time in 3 years, he believed it might actually be true. Monday morning arrived with the weight of new beginnings. Ethan stood before his closet at 5:30, staring at his single suit with a mixture of anxiety and determination. Maya was still asleep, her small form barely visible beneath her comforter, and he wanted to keep it that way for at least another hour. The first day at Lane Enterprises felt monumental in a way that made his chest tight. He'd spent the weekend preparing as much as he could, reviewing the company's recent projects, studying their portfolio strategies, trying to anticipate what would be expected of him. But underneath all that preparation was a current of something else, something he didn't want to examine too closely. The memory of Victoria's hands on his tie, the warmth in her voice when she'd called to offer him the position, the way she'd said his first name like it mattered. "Stop it," he whispered to himself. "She's your boss. That's all she is." But his reflection in the mirror looked skeptical. By 7:15, he had Maya fed and dressed, her backpack checked twice, and they were walking toward the bus stop through the early morning chill. She was unusually quiet, her hand tight in his. "You okay, Maya Bear?" he asked, squeezing her fingers gently. "What if something bad happens while you're at your new job?" she said, her voice small. "What if you can't come get me?" Ethan's heart clenched. Maya's anxiety about abandonment had improved over the past year, but it never fully disappeared. How could it, when the most important person in her world had vanished without warning? He crouched down on the sidewalk, ignoring the other parents and children flowing around them. "Hey, look at me. Nothing bad is going to happen. But even if something did, even if you got sick or scared or just needed me, I would come get you. That's a promise. My job is important, but you're more important. You will always be more important. Understand?" Maya nodded, but her eyes were still worried. "What if they get mad?" "Then they get mad. You come first. Always." The bus arrived, and Maya hugged him tightly before climbing aboard. Ethan watched until it disappeared, then turned toward the subway station, his daughter's fear sitting heavy in his chest. He understood it intimately. They'd both learned the hard way that the world could take everything without warning. The lobby of Lane Enterprises looked different on a Monday morning, filled with employees moving with purpose, voices echoing off the marble floors. Ethan signed in at security, received his temporary badge, and rode the elevator to the 28th floor with 3 other people who talked easily about their weekend plans. He felt like an imposter in his worn suit, carrying his old messenger bag, pretending to belong. Margaret greeted him with the same warmth she'd shown during the interview. "Welcome, Ethan. We're so glad you're here. Let me show you to your office." Office? Ethan had assumed he'd have a cubicle, maybe share space with other analysts. "Of course," Margaret said, leading him down a hallway lined with glass-walled offices. "Everyone on the analyst team has their own space. We find it helps with concentration for the complex modeling work you'll be doing." She stopped at a door near the end of the hall. Inside was a modest but bright office, with a window overlooking the city, a clean desk with a new computer setup, and a bookshelf waiting to be filled. On the desk sat a small succulent plant in a ceramic pot, and a welcome card signed by what looked like the entire department. "I'll let you get settled," Margaret said. "Victoria wanted to meet with you at 9 to go over your initial projects and get you oriented. There's coffee in the break room down the hall, and if you need anything at all, just call extension 2800. That's me." She left, and Ethan stood in his office. Feeling overwhelmed. He set his messenger bag on the desk and opened the welcome card. The signatures were accompanied by brief notes. "Excited to work with you, and welcome to the team, and looking forward to your insights." They felt genuine, not perfunctory. He was reading through them when a knock on his doorframe made him look up. A woman in her 30s with short black hair and an easy smile stood there holding 2 coffee cups. "Ethan Cole," she said. "I'm Jennifer Park, one of the senior analysts. Thought you might need caffeine on your first day. How do you take it?" "Black is perfect," Ethan said, accepting the cup gratefully. "Thank you." "No problem. I know first days can be intense." Jennifer leaned against the doorframe, her posture relaxed. "Victoria runs a tight ship, but she's fair. More than fair, actually. She's probably the best boss I've ever had, and I've been in finance for 12 years. That's good to know," Ethan said, trying not to react to Victoria's name. "Couple of things that might help," Jennifer continued. 1, don't be afraid to ask questions. We've all been new here, and Victoria hates it when people struggle in silence instead of reaching out. 2, the team does lunch together on Fridays. It's casual, but it's a good way to get to know everyone. And 3, if Victoria asks for your opinion, give it honestly. She can smell corporate speak from a mile away, and it drives her crazy. "Noted," Ethan said, filing away each piece of advice. "Also, we have a pretty good work-life balance here, which is rare in finance. Victoria's serious about people not burning out. So if you need to leave at a reasonable hour or take care of personal stuff, that's not just tolerated, it's encouraged." Jennifer's expression turned more serious. "I heard through the grapevine that you're a single parent. Just so you know, that matters here. Victoria's got some strong feelings about supporting working parents." Ethan felt a rush of gratitude mixed with curiosity. "She seems to have strong feelings about a lot of things." "She does," Jennifer agreed. "But they're the right things, which makes all the difference. Anyway, I'll let you settle in. My office is 3 doors down if you need anything." She left, and Ethan spent the next hour familiarizing himself with the computer system, reading through the orientation materials Margaret had left in his inbox, and trying to calm his nerves. At 8:50, he headed toward Victoria's office, which Margaret had pointed out earlier, a corner suite at the far end of the floor. The door was open, but Ethan knocked anyway. Victoria looked up from her computer, and something in her expression shifted when she saw him. A warmth that hadn't been there in the interview, like she was genuinely pleased to see him. "Ethan, come in," she said, standing and gesturing to the seating area by her window rather than the formal desk. "How's your first morning going?" "It's been wonderful," Ethan said honestly, taking a seat in one of the leather chairs. "Everyone's been incredibly welcoming." "Good. That's important to me, that this feels like a team, not just a collection of people working in proximity." Victoria sat across from him, and Ethan noticed she was dressed more casually today than she had been in the interview. Navy slacks and a cream-colored blouse, simple jewelry. She looked approachable, which somehow made Ethan more nervous. "I wanted to check in with you personally before throwing you into the deep end. How are you feeling about everything?" "Honestly?" "Grateful and terrified in equal measure." Victoria smiled. "That's a good combination. The terror keeps you sharp. The gratitude keeps you grounded. She reached for a tablet on the side table. I'm going to start you on 2 projects. The first is the Portland development we discussed in your interview. Marcus was impressed with your analysis, so we'd like you to take point on the due diligence phase. Ethan felt a surge of adrenaline. I'd be honored. The second project is more complex, Victoria continued. We're exploring a partnership with a renewable energy startup that's developed an innovative solar storage technology. The science is promising, but the financial structure is messy. They've got multiple investors with competing interests, unclear IP ownership, and projections that are either wildly optimistic or we're all missing something important. I need someone to dig into it and tell me what's real. That sounds challenging. It is, but I think you'll find it interesting. Victoria set the tablet aside and looked at him directly. Ethan, I'm giving you these projects because I believe you can handle them. But I also want you to know that I understand you're managing more than just a job. If you need accommodations around Maya's schedule, or if emergencies come up, I need you to tell me. Don't suffer in silence trying to be the perfect employee. That's not what I'm asking for. The kindness in her words made Ethan's throat tight. Thank you. That means more than you know. I do know, actually. Victoria's expression shifted to something more guarded, like she'd revealed more than she intended. I'll have Marcus send over all the project files this afternoon. In the meantime, spend today getting oriented, meeting the team, figuring out where everything is. There's no rush. Ethan stood to leave, but paused at the door. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why did you hire me? I mean, my resume has a 3-year gap and I don't have corporate experience at this level. You could have hired someone more qualified on paper. Victoria was quiet for a moment, her dark eyes thoughtful. You want the honest answer? Always. Your interview was the first time in months that someone sat in that conference room and talked about work in terms of human impact rather than just numbers on a spreadsheet. You understood that finance isn't abstract. It affects real lives, real communities. That perspective is rare, and it's valuable. She paused. Also, you've been managing complexity most people can't imagine. If you can keep a child alive and thriving while rebuilding your entire life from scratch, you can handle our deadlines. Ethan felt something shift in his chest. Thank you for seeing that. Thank you for not hiding it, Victoria said softly. The moment stretched between them, charged with something Ethan couldn't name. Then Victoria's phone buzzed, breaking the spell, and Ethan took it as his cue to leave. The rest of the day passed in a blur of introductions and system orientations, and Jennifer taking him to lunch with 3 other analysts who immediately made him feel like part of the team. By 5 o'clock, Ethan's head was swimming with information, but he felt more hopeful than he had in years. He was packing up his bag when his phone rang. Maya's school, according to the caller ID. His stomach dropped. Mr. Cole? This is Nurse Williams at Riverside Elementary. Maya's okay, but she's not feeling well. She's got a fever and she's asking for you. Can you come pick her up? I'll be there in 20 minutes, Ethan said, already grabbing his jacket. He rushed past Margaret's desk. Family emergency. I need to leave. Go, Margaret said firmly. Take care of your daughter. Everything else can wait. Ethan made it to the school in 18 minutes, finding Maya curled up on the nurse's cot, looking small and miserable. Her face was flushed, her eyes glassy with fever. Daddy, she whispered when she saw him, and Ethan's heart broke a little. I'm here, baby. Let's get you home. He signed her out, carried her to the subway despite her protests that she could walk, and had her home and settled on the couch within the hour. Her temperature was 101.5, high enough to worry about, but not dangerous yet. He gave her children's acetaminophen, got her into comfortable pajamas, and made the chicken soup Mrs. Chen had taught him to make. Maya fell asleep around 8, her head in his lap while he sat on the couch monitoring her breathing and temperature. His phone buzzed with an email notification. He almost ignored it, but something made him check. It was from Victoria, sent at 7:43 p.m. Ethan, Margaret mentioned you had to leave for a family emergency. I hope everything is all right. Please don't worry about work tomorrow if you need to stay home with Maya. We'll manage. Take care of her and yourself. V. Ethan stared in the email, feeling something warm unfold in his chest. She'd remembered Maya's name. She'd assumed correctly what the emergency was. and she'd taken the time to email him personally instead of having HR send a standard message. He typed a response with one hand, careful not to disturb Maya. "Thank you. She has a fever but seems okay otherwise. I should be able to bring her to Mrs. Chen's tomorrow if she's improved, but I appreciate the flexibility. It means everything. Ethan." He hit send and set the phone aside, stroking Maya's hair while she slept. This job, this opportunity, it felt different from anything he'd experienced before, not just because of the work itself, but because of the person leading the company. Victoria Lane saw people, not just employees. She understood that life was complicated and messy and didn't fit neatly into business hours. And if Ethan was being brutally honest with himself, somewhere beneath his gratitude was a dangerous attraction he had no business feeling. Maya's fever broke around midnight. By morning, she was alert and hungry, demanding pancakes and asking if she could go to school. Ethan kept her home anyway, brought her to Mrs. Chen's with strict instructions to call if anything changed, and made it to work by 9:30. Victoria was in a meeting when he arrived, but she'd left a note on his desk in handwriting that was somehow both elegant and efficient. "Glad she's better. Take your time getting started today." Over the next 3 weeks, Ethan settled into a rhythm that felt almost sustainable. He'd arrive at work by 8:30, dive into the Portland project and the solar storage analysis, collaborate with the team, and leave by 5:15 to pick up Maya. He brought work home after she went to bed, but the flexibility to be present for his daughter made the extra hours feel manageable rather than crushing. The Portland project was progressing well. Ethan's environmental risk assessment had identified potential issues that saved the company from a costly mistake, and Marcus had publicly praised his thoroughness in a team meeting. The solar storage project was thornier. The more Ethan dug into the financials, the more red flags he found. The technology was legitimate, but the startup's management had made promises to investors that were mathematically impossible to keep. He was working through the numbers for the third time when Victoria appeared in his doorway. It was Thursday evening, almost 6, and most of the office had cleared out. "Burning the midnight oil?" she asked, leaning against the frame. Ethan looked up, surprised. "Just trying to make sense of the solar project. Something's not adding up." "Show me." Victoria moved into his office, and Ethan turned his monitor so she could see. He walked her through the analysis, the investor commitments, the projected revenue streams, the timeline for profitability that depended on market adoption rates that had never been achieved by any comparable technology. "They're not lying exactly," Ethan explained, "but they're being wildly optimistic to the point of delusion. If we invest based on these projections, we'll lose money, probably a lot of it." Victoria studied the screen, her expression serious. "What's your recommendation?" "Walk away from the current deal structure. If we're interested in the technology itself, we could offer a smaller investment with more oversight and realistic expectations. But partnering with management that's either incompetent or dishonest, that's a disaster waiting to happen. Even though walking away means we might miss out on breakthrough technology? Even then, because if the technology is as good as they claim, someone else will figure out how to commercialize it properly. And if it's not, we'll have avoided lighting money on fire." Ethan paused. "Unless you disagree with that assessment." "I don't," Victoria said. "I wanted to see if you'd have the courage to recommend we walk away from something promising because the fundamentals are wrong. A lot of analysts get seduced by the exciting narrative and ignore the math." "The math doesn't lie. People do." Victoria smiled. "Exactly. I'm going to take your recommendation to the board. This was a test, Ethan, and you passed." She glanced at her watch. "It's after 6. Why are you still here?" "Maya's at a friend's house for dinner. I've got another hour before I need to pick her up." "How is she? Fully recovered from the fever?" The fact that Victoria remembered, that she asked, it shouldn't have meant so much, but it did. "She's great, bounced back like kids do. She's actually been asking about where I work. I think she's having trouble picturing what I do all day." "Bring her by sometime," Victoria said. "I'd love to meet her." The offer was casual, friendly, exactly what a good boss might say. But something in Victoria's eyes made it feel like more. Or maybe Ethan was just projecting his own complicated feelings onto neutral interactions. He couldn't tell anymore. "She'd like that," he said carefully. "She's been painting pictures of me at work. They're mostly abstract impressions of someone in a suit surrounded by papers, but I'm told they're very accurate." Victoria laughed, and the sound did something to Ethan's chest. "I'd love to see them." "I'll bring one in." They stood there for a moment, the office quiet around them, the city lights beginning to glow outside the window. Ethan felt the pull again, that dangerous attraction he'd been trying to ignore. Victoria must have felt something too, because she took a small step back, her expression becoming more guarded. "I should let you get back to work," she said. "Good analysis, Ethan. Really good." After she left, Ethan sat in his office trying to focus on the spreadsheet in front of him, but his mind kept drifting to the way Victoria had said his name, the warmth in her laugh, the moment when their eyes had met and something had passed between them that felt electric and terrifying. He was in trouble, deep trouble, because his boss wasn't just intelligent and fair and ethical. She was also beautiful and kind and saw him in a way that made him feel visible for the first time since Sarah died. And there was absolutely nothing he could do about it. Friday brought the team lunch Jennifer had mentioned, 12 analysts gathering at a Thai restaurant 2 blocks from the office. Ethan found himself seated between Jennifer and a quiet man named David who specialized in environmental impact assessments. The conversation flowed easily, work gossip mixed with personal stories, genuine laughter, the kind of camaraderie Ethan had forgotten existed in professional settings. "So how's your first month been?" Jennifer asked, passing him the pad thai. "Honestly, better than I imagined. This is the first job I've had where I don't feel like I'm constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop." "That's because Victoria doesn't believe in shoes dropping," David said. "She believes in clear communication and treating people like adults. It's revolutionary, really." "Has she always been like that?" Ethan asked, trying to sound casual. "As long as I've been here," Jennifer said, "which is 4 years. I know she had a pretty intense career before starting Lane Enterprises. Word is she left Goldman Sachs after they pressured her to approve an investment that would have displaced thousands of people from affordable housing. She refused, they pushed back, and she walked away from a 7-figure compensation package." "She chose ethics over money?" Ethan said. "Every time," David confirmed. "That's why working here feels different. The mission isn't just rhetoric, it's real." That night after Maya was asleep, Ethan found himself researching Victoria Lane. Not company information, he'd already absorbed that, but her personal history. There wasn't much. A few old articles about her Goldman Sachs resignation, written with the skeptical tone journalists use when someone does something that seems too principled to be believed. A brief mention in a profile about successful female entrepreneurs. An interview from 6 years ago where she'd said, "I'm not interested in building wealth for its own sake. I'm interested in proving that financial success and social responsibility can coexist." What he didn't find were any mentions of family, relationships, or personal life. Victoria Lane seemed to exist only as CEO, only as the driving force behind Lane Enterprises. It made Ethan wonder what losses had shaped her, what grief had taught her to separate her public and private selves so completely. Monday morning, Maya announced she wanted to make Victoria a picture. "Why?" Ethan asked, surprised. "Because she gave you the job that makes you happy," Maya said simply. "I want to say thank you." So Ethan found himself arriving at work, carrying both his messenger bag and a painting of what Maya insisted was the city skyline at sunrise, though it looked more like a collection of colorful rectangles with a yellow circle. He hesitated outside Victoria's office, feeling foolish, but a promise to his daughter was sacred. He knocked. Victoria looked up and smiled. "Come in." "I have something for you," Ethan said, holding up the painting. "From Maya. She wanted to thank you for hiring me. She says it's the sunrise over the city, which is apparently what hope looks like when you're 7. Victoria's expression shifted into something Ethan couldn't quite read. She stood and walked over, taking the painting carefully, like it was precious. "This is beautiful," she said softly. "Tell Maya thank you. I'm going to hang it right here." She gestured to the wall beside her desk, where a few framed certificates hung. "It'll remind me why we do this work." "You don't have to." "I want to," Victoria said, meeting his eyes. She's right. Hope does look like sunrise. We just forget that sometimes. The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken things. Then Victoria cleared her throat and moved back to her desk, the professional mask sliding back into place. I have the board meeting this afternoon about the solar project. I'll let you know how it goes. Thank you, Ethan said, and left before the feeling swirling in his chest could translate into words he couldn't take back. The board approved Ethan's recommendation to walk away from the solar investment. Victoria sent him a brief email that afternoon. Board voted unanimously to follow your analysis. Well done. This kind of integrity is exactly what we need. That night, Ethan lay awake thinking about integrity and attraction and the impossible situation he'd found himself in. He was grateful for this job, grateful for Victoria's leadership and kindness, but beneath the gratitude was something more dangerous. The growing awareness that when Victoria smiled at him, he felt something he hadn't felt since Sarah. When she said his name, it sounded like it mattered. When their eyes met across a conference table, the rest of the room seemed to fade. He couldn't act on it. She was his boss. The power dynamic alone made anything inappropriate, even if she felt the same way, which he had no evidence to believe. And even if all those obstacles didn't exist, Ethan wasn't sure he was ready to open his heart again. The risk of loss felt too great. Maya had already lost her mother. He couldn't give her hope of something more and then have it disappear. So Ethan did what he'd been doing for 3 years. He carried the complicated feelings, acknowledged them privately, and kept moving forward. One day at a time, one project at a time, one moment of seeing Victoria across the office and feeling his heart accelerate, then deliberately looking away and returning to work. It would get easier, he told himself. Eventually the attraction would fade into comfortable professionalism. Eventually he'd stop noticing the way her eyes lit up when she talked about a project she believed in, or the rare smile that transformed her entire face. Eventually, he'd forget the way her hands had felt straightening his tie, warm and gentle and impossibly intimate. Eventually. But as weeks turned into months and the feelings only grew stronger, Ethan began to suspect that some forms of hope, even the painful ones, didn't fade at all. They didn't fade. If anything, the feelings intensified with proximity and time, sharpened by every small interaction that revealed more of who Victoria Lane actually was beneath the CEO exterior. 3 months into his tenure at Lane Enterprises, Ethan found himself in an impossible situation. Professionally thriving, while emotionally unraveling, grateful for stability, while terrified by the pull he felt toward a woman he couldn't have. The breaking point came on a Tuesday in early spring when Maya's school called at 2 in the afternoon. Ethan was in the middle of a presentation to the investment committee, walking them through his analysis of a green housing development in Detroit, when his phone vibrated insistently against the conference table. He ignored it the first time. The second time, he glanced down and saw the school's number, and his stomach dropped. "I'm sorry," he said, interrupting his own sentence. "I need to take this. It's my daughter's school." Victoria, sitting at the head of the table, nodded immediately. "Of course. We'll take a 5-minute break." Ethan stepped into the hallway, his heart racing. "This is Ethan Cole." "Mr. Cole, this is Principal Harris. Maya's had an accident on the playground. She fell from the monkey bars and we think she may have broken her arm. We've called an ambulance, but we need you to meet us at County General." The world tilted. Ethan pressed his hand against the wall to steady himself. "Is she conscious? She's conscious and talking, but she's in a lot of pain. The paramedics are with her now." "I'll be there in 15 minutes. He hung up and turned to find Victoria standing in the hallway, her expression concerned. "What happened?" "Maya fell. Possible broken arm. I need to get to the hospital." Ethan was already moving, his mind racing through logistics. Mrs. Chen was visiting her sister in Boston. He had no backup. "I'm sorry about the presentation." "Stop," Victoria said firmly. "The presentation doesn't matter. Your daughter matters. Go." "But the committee. I'll finish the presentation myself. You trained me well enough on the project details." She was already walking with him toward the elevator. "Which hospital?" "County General." "Do you have a car?" "No, I'll take the subway." "That'll take too long." Victoria pulled out her phone. "I'm calling my driver. He'll get you there faster." "Victoria, you don't have to." She looked at him, and something in her eyes stopped his protest. "Yes, I do. Let me help, Ethan. Please." 10 minutes later, Ethan was in the back of a town car weaving through midday traffic while the driver, a calm man named Robert, who seemed to understand the urgency without needing explanation, found routes Ethan didn't know existed. They made it to County General in 12 minutes. Maya was in the emergency room, her small face streaked with tears, her left arm cradled against her chest. When she saw Ethan, she started crying harder. "Daddy, it hurts so much." "I know, baby. I'm here now." Ethan gathered her carefully into his arms, feeling her shake with sobs. "The doctors are going to fix it, okay? You're going to be fine." The next few hours passed in the particular hell of emergency room waiting, x-rays and consultations, and insurance paperwork and Maya's pain that medication could only partially touch. It was a clean break of the radius, the doctor explained, showing Ethan the x-ray. She'd need a cast for 6 weeks, maybe 8 depending on how well it healed. No permanent damage, but it would hurt for a while. They were waiting for the orthopedic specialist to come apply the cast when Ethan's phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. "How is she?" "Clean break. Getting a cast now. Should be home in a few hours." He typed back with one hand while holding Maya with the other. "I'm glad it's not worse. Take tomorrow off. She'll need you. I can't afford to—" "Paid leave, Ethan. Take care of your daughter." He stared at the phone, throat tight. Then Maya stirred against him and said in a small voice, "Is that your boss?" "Yes." "Is she mad that you left?" "No, sweetheart. She's not mad. She wants to make sure you're okay." "She sounds nice." "She is," Ethan said quietly. "She's very nice." Maya chose a purple cast because purple was her favorite color, and also because the orthopedic specialist told her it was the choice of warriors. By the time they left the hospital, it was almost 8 o'clock. Maya was exhausted, loopy from pain medication, and Ethan was running on adrenaline and fear that was slowly metabolizing into relief. Robert was waiting in the parking lot. Ethan had assumed he'd left hours ago, but there he was, leaning against the town car with a patient expression. "Ms. Lane asked me to wait," he said simply, "to make sure you both got home safely." The gesture nearly undid Ethan. "Thank you," he managed. Robert drove them home through the dark streets, and Ethan carried Maya up 3 flights of stairs to their apartment because the elevator was broken again. He got her into pajamas, gave her the prescribed pain medication, and settled her on the couch with her favorite blanket and the stuffed rabbit that had seen her through every crisis. "Daddy?" she said sleepily. "Will you stay with me?" "Always," he said, sitting beside her. "I'm not going anywhere." She fell asleep with her head in his lap, the purple cast resting on a pillow. Ethan sat in the dimness of their living room, stroking her hair, and felt the full weight of the day crash over him. The terror when the school called. The helplessness in the emergency room. The bone-deep exhaustion of being the only person responsible for another human being's well-being. And underneath it all, the profound gratitude for Victoria's response. She hadn't questioned his need to leave. She hadn't made him feel guilty or inadequate. She'd simply helped, with a directness that suggested she understood exactly what he needed, because she'd needed similar help herself once. His phone buzzed softly. Another text from Victoria. "I know you're probably busy with Maya, but I wanted you to know, the committee loved the Detroit project. They approved full funding. Your presentation was excellent, even the half I had to improvise through. Rest well. See you when you're ready. V." Ethan typed a response, deleted it, tried again. Finally settled on, "Thank you for everything today." I don't know how to express what it meant. Her reply came quickly. "You already have, by being the father Maya needs. That's worth more than any work deadline." He set the phone aside and closed his eyes, listening to Maya's soft breathing. Somewhere in the past few hours, something had shifted. The feelings he'd been trying to contain, to rationalize away as simple attraction or misplaced gratitude, had crystallized into something sharper and more dangerous. He was falling for Victoria Lane, not the CEO, not the boss, but the woman who'd sent her driver to help a frightened father get to his injured daughter. The woman who saw past his circumstances to who he actually was. The woman who made him want to hope again. It was completely impossible, completely inappropriate, and completely, devastatingly real. The next morning, Ethan woke on the couch with a stiff neck and Maya curled against him, her cast propped on a cushion. She stirred when he moved, her eyes opening slowly. "How do you feel?" he asked. "It hurts," she said, "but not as bad as yesterday." "That's good. The doctor said it would get better each day." He kissed her forehead. How about pancakes for breakfast? With chocolate chips? If that's what the warrior with the purple cast wants, that's what she gets. They spent the day together in careful domesticity, pancakes and cartoons, reading books with Maya tucked under his arm, helping her figure out how to do things one-handed. Around noon, the doorbell rang. Ethan opened it to find a delivery person holding an enormous basket filled with books, art supplies, puzzles, and a stuffed dragon wearing a purple cape. "Delivery for Maya Cole," the person said. The card read, "For a brave warrior, wishing you a speedy recovery. Victoria Lane." Maya's face lit up when she saw the dragon. "She sent me a present?" "She did." "Can I call her to say thank you?" Ethan hesitated. The request was innocent, but it felt like crossing a line he'd been carefully maintaining. Still, Maya was looking at him with such hope, and teaching gratitude mattered more than his complicated feelings. "Let me text her first and ask if that's okay," he said. He sent Victoria a message. "The basket is incredibly generous. Maya wants to call and thank you personally if you have a moment." Victoria's response came within minutes. "I'd love that. Call whenever works for her." Ethan dialed, his heart beating too fast, and Victoria answered on the second ring. "Hello? Hi, it's Ethan. I have someone who wants to talk to you." He handed the phone to Maya, who held it carefully with her good hand. "Ms. Lane, this is Maya. Thank you so much for the presents. The dragon is my favorite. I named him Victor because it sounds like Victoria." Ethan could hear Victoria's warm laugh through the phone. Maya continued, "My arm hurts, but it's purple, which is the best color. Daddy says I was very brave. Did you ever break your arm?" Whatever Victoria said made Maya giggle. They talked for another few minutes about the cast and school and Maya's art projects, with Maya describing in elaborate detail the painting she'd made for Victoria months ago. Finally, Maya said, "Do you want to talk to my daddy again?" She handed the phone back to Ethan. "She wants to say goodbye to you." "Victoria?" "She's wonderful," Victoria said, and there was something in her voice that made Ethan's chest tighten. "Thank you for letting her call. It made my day. Thank you for the basket. It was really thoughtful. I remember being 7 and having a cast. It's scary and boring at the same time. I wanted her to have distractions." A pause. "How are you holding up?" "I'm okay. Tired, but okay." "Take care of yourself too, Ethan. Maya needs you healthy." After they hung up, Maya looked at Ethan with wide eyes. "I like her, Daddy. She's nice, and she laughs real." "Laughs real?" Some grown-ups do a pretend laugh when kids talk to them, but Ms. Lane's laugh was real, was like she actually thought I was funny. Out of the mouths of children, Ethan thought. Maya had identified in minutes what had taken him weeks to fully recognize. That Victoria's warmth wasn't performance or polish. It was genuine. They returned to work on Thursday. Maya went back to school with strict instructions to be careful, and Ethan arrived at the office to find a stack of messages from team members asking about Maya and offering to help with any workload that had piled up. Jennifer had covered his most urgent deadlines. Marcus had rescheduled the client meeting Ethan had missed. Victoria stopped by his office mid-morning, leaning in the doorway in a way that was becoming familiar. "How's the patient?" she asked. "Already trying to do cartwheels despite explicit doctor's orders not to," Ethan said. "I've created a 7-year-old who thinks a purple cast makes her invincible. That's actually a sign of good parenting. Confidence and resilience are valuable traits." "Even when they give me heart attacks?" "Especially then." Victoria's smile faded into something more serious. "I wanted to talk to you about something. Do you have a few minutes?" Ethan's stomach tensed. "Of course." She came in and closed the door behind her, which immediately made him nervous. Victoria rarely closed doors. She sat in the chair across from his desk, her posture more hesitant than he'd ever seen. "I've been thinking about the other day," she began, "about what happened when Maya got hurt and how you had to leave in the middle of the presentation. I'm really sorry about that." "Don't," Victoria said firmly. "Don't apologize. You did exactly what you should have done, but it made me realize that we need to formalize some policies around family emergencies and flexible scheduling. You shouldn't have to apologize or feel guilty for being a parent." "Victoria, you already give me more flexibility than any job I've ever had." which is why I want to make it official policy for everyone. I'm proposing a new benefits package to the board: enhanced parental leave, emergency childcare assistance, flexible hours for parents, and a fund for unexpected medical expenses. I should have implemented this years ago, but I needed the push. Your situation gave me that. Ethan stared at her. You're restructuring company policy because of me? I'm fixing an oversight that should have been addressed from the beginning. Your situation just illuminated it clearly. She met his eyes. You've given me a lot, Ethan. Not just good work, though that's been exceptional. You've reminded me why I started this company, to create a place where people's worth isn't measured only by their availability or their ability to pretend their lives outside work don't exist. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know that the changes are coming, and they're partly because you had the courage to be honest about your life instead of hiding it. After she left, Ethan sat at his desk feeling unmoored. Every interaction with Victoria seemed to peel back another layer, revealing depths he hadn't anticipated. She wasn't just a good boss. She was someone actively trying to build something better, someone who saw her power as responsibility rather than privilege. And he was so far gone for her, it hurt. The next few weeks established a new rhythm. Maya's cast became part of their routine, along with the parade of friends signing it at school, and Maya's growing collection of stories about what people thought had happened. The official version, Fell from Monkey Bars, was apparently boring, so Maya had created elaborate alternatives involving dragon rescues and superhero training that Ethan pretended not to hear. At work, the Detroit project moved into implementation phase, and Ethan found himself working closely with Victoria on strategic decisions. They fell into an easy collaboration, finishing each other's thoughts, anticipating concerns, pushing each other toward better solutions. It felt natural in a way that probably should have worried him more than it did. They were reviewing construction timelines in her office one evening when Victoria's phone rang. She glanced at it and something shuddered in her expression. I need to take this, she said. I'm sorry. Of course. Ethan started to stand, but she gestured for him to stay. She answered, her voice cool and professional. Mother, this isn't a good time. A pause. No, I'm not coming to the gala. We've discussed this. Another pause, longer. I'm aware of your disappointment. I've been aware of it for 15 years. Ethan pretended to study the documents in front of him, but he couldn't help overhearing Victoria's side of the conversation. Her tone was controlled, but he could hear the tension underneath. Because I don't want to spend an evening being paraded around like a show pony for your friends to evaluate my life choices. Victoria's jaw tightened. I built a successful company based on actual values rather than just accumulating wealth. If that embarrasses you, that's your problem, not mine. She listened for another moment, then said simply, Goodbye, Mother, and ended the call. The silence that followed was heavy. Victoria sat very still, her expression carefully blank in a way Ethan recognized from his own mirror, the look of someone trying very hard not to feel. I'm sorry, she said finally. That was unprofessional. It was human, Ethan said gently. You don't have to apologize for having a complicated relationship with your mother. Victoria looked at him, surprise flickering across her face. How did you... I recognized the tone. My father and I haven't spoken in 5 years. He thought Sarah and I were making a mistake getting married so young, having Maya when we were still in school. After Sarah died, he called to say he'd been right, that I'd ruined my life with poor choices. I hung up and haven't answered his calls since. I'm sorry. That's awful. So is being judged by your own mother for building something meaningful, Ethan said. For what it's worth, what you've created here, it matters. It matters to me. It matters to everyone who works here, and it matters to all the people whose lives are better because of the projects we fund. If she can't see that, it's her loss. Victoria's eyes were bright, and for a moment Ethan thought she might cry. But she blinked, and the moment passed, leaving only a soft vulnerability that made his heart ache. Thank you, she said quietly. Sometimes I forget that the work is enough, that I don't need external validation to know I'm doing something worthwhile. We all forget that sometimes. It's why we need people to remind us. They held each other's gaze across the desk, and Ethan felt the air between them charge with something electric. Victoria broke eye contact first, standing abruptly. "It's late. You should go home to Maya." Ethan recognized the dismissal for what it was, self-protection. He stood, gathering his papers. "If you ever need to talk about family stuff, I'm a good listener, and I'm very familiar with the particular pain of parental disappointment." "I'll remember that," Victoria said. But as Ethan left her office, he wondered if she actually would. Victoria Lane seemed to have mastered the art of being present for others while keeping her own struggles private. It was a lonely way to live, and he recognized it because he'd lived that way himself for years. The breakthrough came 2 weeks later, during the annual company retreat. Lane Enterprises took the entire staff to a resort in the Catskills for a long weekend of team building and strategic planning. It was optional, and Ethan had initially planned not to go. Leaving Maya for a whole weekend felt impossible. But Mrs. Chen had insisted she'd love to have Maya stay with her, and Jennifer had convinced him that the retreat was actually important for career development. "Plus, it's genuinely fun," she'd said. "Victoria believes in actual rest and team bonding, not just trust falls and corporate nonsense." So Ethan found himself on a charter bus, heading north with 40 colleagues, trying not to feel guilty about leaving Maya. She'd been excited about her sleepover with Mrs. Chen, who'd promised to teach her to make dumplings and let her stay up late watching movies. The resort was beautiful, nestled among mountains that were just beginning to show spring green. The first evening was casual, dinner and drinks, people breaking into small groups for conversation. Ethan found himself on the deck overlooking the lake with Jennifer, David, and Marcus, talking about the upcoming projects and watching the sunset paint the water gold. Victoria appeared around 8, changed from her usual business attire into jeans and a soft sweater that made her look younger, more approachable. She moved through the groups easily, stopping to chat with everyone, making people laugh. When she reached their cluster, she settled into the empty chair beside Ethan with a glass of wine and a visible exhale of relief. "I'm officially off duty," she announced. "For the next 48 hours, I'm just Victoria, not CEO Victoria." "Is there a difference?" David asked, grinning. "I'd like to think so. CEO Victoria has to make hard decisions and maintain professional distance. Regular Victoria just wants to relax and enjoy good company." They talked for hours, the conversation meandering from work projects to favorite books to Jennifer's disastrous attempt at online dating. Someone started a bonfire, and people drifted toward it, roasting marshmallows and telling stories. Ethan found himself sitting on a log beside Victoria, both of them staring into the flames. "This is nice," she said softly. "I forget sometimes that building community is as important as building profits." "You've built both," Ethan said. "That's rare." "It's lonely sometimes," Victoria admitted, and there was something in her voice that made Ethan look at her. "Being responsible for everyone's livelihoods, knowing that my decisions affect real families. The weight of it." "I imagine it is." "Do you ever feel lonely?" Victoria asked, turning to face him. "Even when you're with Maya?" The question was intimate in a way that should have made Ethan deflect. Instead, he answered honestly. "All the time. I love her more than anything, but adult conversation and connection, I didn't realize how much I needed that until I came to work for you." "For Lane Enterprises, you mean?" "No," Ethan said carefully. "I meant what I said." Victoria held his gaze, and in the firelight, her eyes looked darker, more vulnerable. "Ethan, Victoria, we need your input on something." Marcus appeared beside them, apologetic but insistent. "The board agenda for Monday." The moment shattered. Victoria stood smoothly, slipping back into CEO mode. "Of course, I'll be right there." She left, and Ethan sat by the fire feeling like he'd just stepped to the edge of something profound and been pulled back at the last second. He wasn't sure if he was relieved or disappointed. The next day brought structured activities, a morning hike that Ethan joined despite his complete lack of outdoors experience, followed by afternoon workshops on team dynamics and creative problem solving. Ethan found himself in a small group with Victoria and 3 others, working through a complex business scenario that required collaboration and creative thinking. Victoria was different in this setting, more playful, quicker to laugh, willing to try unconventional solutions. At one point, she and Ethan ended up in a heated debate about risk assessment that had everyone else watching like spectators at a tennis match. "You're too cautious," Victoria argued. Sometimes you have to make the leap before you can see the landing. And sometimes you have to build the landing before you jump, Ethan countered. Calculated risk is different from recklessness. But how do you know where the line is? You don't. You make your best guess and prepare for the consequences. They were both grinning now, the argument playful rather than serious. Jennifer laughed. You two think exactly alike while thinking you're complete opposites. It's fascinating. That evening's dinner was formal, a banquet with speeches about company achievements and recognition for outstanding work. Ethan was shocked when Victoria called his name for the Excellence in Analysis Award, citing his work on the Portland and Detroit projects. Ethan Cole joined us less than 6 months ago, Victoria said from the podium, but his impact has been profound. He brings not just technical skill, but moral clarity and deep humanity to every analysis. He reminds us that behind every financial model are real people whose lives will be affected by our decisions. That perspective is invaluable. Ethan accepted the award, a glass sculpture and a generous bonus, feeling exposed and honored in equal measure. As he returned to his seat, Victoria caught his eye and smiled, and Ethan felt something in his chest crack open. He was in love with her. Not just attracted, not just grateful. Actually, deeply in love with Victoria Lane. The realization should have terrified him. Instead, it felt like finally admitting a truth he'd been avoiding for months. The problem was, he had absolutely no idea what to do about it. The answer came to him later that night, when he couldn't sleep and found himself walking along the lakeshore under a sky full of stars. He could do nothing about it. Victoria was his boss, the person who controlled his livelihood, and by extension, Maya's stability. The power imbalance made any romantic overture inappropriate, potentially predatory, even if his intentions were pure. And beyond the professional ethics, there was the simple fact that he had no idea if Victoria felt anything beyond professional respect and friendly concern. That moment by the fire could have been just two people having an honest conversation. The way she looked at him during the award ceremony could have been simple pride in an employee's achievement. Ethan had spent 3 years in a fog of grief and survival. He didn't trust his ability to read romantic signals anymore. For all he knew, he was projecting his own feelings onto neutral interactions and seeing reciprocation where none existed. The smart thing, the safe thing, was to bury these feelings as deep as they'd go and focus on what mattered. Being a good father, doing excellent work, rebuilding the stable life Maya deserved. Victoria had given him an extraordinary opportunity. The least he could do was not complicate it with inappropriate feelings. He was still standing by the lake when he heard footsteps behind him. He turned to find Victoria approaching, wrapped in a cardigan against the night chill, her hair loose around her shoulders instead of pulled back in its usual professional style. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked, stopping a few feet away. "Too much in my head," Ethan admitted. "I know the feeling." Victoria moved to stand beside him, both of them facing the dark water. "I saw you leave the bonfire. Wanted to make sure you were okay." "I'm fine, just needed some air." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, listening to the gentle lap of water against the shore. Then Victoria said quietly, "That thing you said yesterday, about feeling lonely even when you're with Maya, I understand that more than you might think." Ethan glanced at her. "You feel lonely even running a company full of people?" "Especially then. Being responsible for everyone means maintaining distance. You can't be too close to people whose livelihoods depend on your judgment. It's isolating." She paused. "Until recently, I'd made my peace with that isolation, told myself it was the price of leadership." "What changed recently?" Victoria turned to look at him, and even in the darkness, Ethan could see the vulnerability in her expression. "You did." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Ethan's heart was pounding so hard he was sure she could hear it. "Victoria, I know I shouldn't say this," she continued, her voice steady despite the tremor Ethan could hear underneath. "I know it's inappropriate and complicated and probably a terrible idea, but I'm tired of pretending I don't feel it. 3 months ago, you walked into my conference room and I fixed your tie, and something shifted. Every day since, I've been trying to convince myself it was just professional admiration or friendly concern. But it's not. It's more than that, and I think you feel it too." Ethan couldn't breathe. "I do," he said finally. "I felt it since that first interview, but Victoria, You're my boss, the power dynamic. I know, believe me, I've thought about nothing else for weeks. The ethical implications, the potential for harm, the risk to both our careers. She wrapped her arms around herself. But I also know that I've never felt this way about anyone, and I'm tired of letting fear make all my decisions. What are you saying? I'm saying I don't know what the answer is, but I think we need to acknowledge what's happening instead of pretending it doesn't exist. Victoria's voice was stronger now, more certain. I'm saying that I care about you, Ethan. Not just as an employee, but as a person, and I think you care about me too. I'm in love with you, Ethan said, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. I've been trying not to be, trying to convince myself it's just gratitude or attraction or anything other than what it actually is. But I can't lie anymore, not even to myself. I'm in love with you, Victoria, and it terrifies me. Victoria closed the distance between them, reaching up to touch his face with trembling fingers. It terrifies me too. But maybe that's okay. Maybe being terrified means it matters enough to be worth the risk. What about the company? The ethics concerns? We'll figure it out, transparently, carefully, with proper oversight. I won't let this compromise your position or put you at risk. But Ethan, I can't keep pretending I don't want this, that I don't want you. She was so close now that Ethan could feel her breath. Every rational thought told him to step back, to maintain the distance that professionalism required. But his heart was screaming at him to close the gap, to stop being afraid, to take the leap Victoria had talked about earlier. He kissed her. Softly at first, tentative, giving her every opportunity to pull away. Instead, she leaned into him, her hands coming up to tangle in his hair, and the kiss deepened into something that felt like coming home after years of being lost. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Victoria rested her forehead against his. We should talk about what this means, she whispered. We should, Ethan agreed. But maybe not tonight. Tonight, can we just have this? Yes, Victoria said, and kissed him again. They stayed by the lake for another hour, talking in quiet voices about everything and nothing. Victoria told him about her childhood, growing up wealthy but emotionally impoverished, parents who valued status over substance, the loneliness of always being measured against impossible standards. Ethan shared more about Sarah, about the accident and the grief and the slow process of learning to live in a world that no longer made sense. I thought I'd never feel this way again, he admitted. After Sarah died, it felt like that part of me died too, like I'd used up my capacity for this kind of connection. But you didn't, Victoria said softly. No, I didn't. He pulled her closer, marveling at the simple rightness of her in his arms. I'm still scared, though, of losing this, of losing you, of Maya getting attached and then, I'm not going anywhere, Victoria said firmly. I don't make commitments lightly, Ethan. If we're doing this, I'm all in. But you're right that we need to think about Maya. She comes first. She always comes first. She's going to have questions about why her dad is spending time with his boss outside of work. Then we answer them honestly, in age-appropriate ways. We don't hide this, but we're also careful about how we navigate it. Victoria pulled back to look at him. I want to meet her properly, not as your boss, but as someone who cares about her father. Is that okay? The thought of Victoria and Maya together made Ethan's chest warm. She already likes you. She talks about you all the time, the nice lady who sent her the dragon, who laughs real. Victoria smiled. Laughs real? Apparently, some adults do fake laughs when kids talk to them. You don't. Because kids are honest in ways adults forget how to be. They're worth listening to. They finally returned to the resort around midnight, parting in the hallway with a kiss that promised more while acknowledging the need for discretion. Ethan fell asleep feeling lighter than he had in years, despite the complications that waited on the other side of this weekend. The next morning brought coffee and anxious energy as Ethan tried to act normal around colleagues who had no idea his entire world had shifted overnight. Victoria was her usual professional self at breakfast, but when their eyes met across the room, something passed between them that made Ethan's pulse quicken. They managed to find a private moment during the mid-morning break, slipping into an empty conference room while everyone else was at the coffee station. I've been thinking, Victoria said without preamble, about how to handle this at work. And? First, we need to disclose the relationship to HR and the board. Complete transparency about the situation and how we're managing potential conflicts of interest. Ethan nodded. That makes sense. Second, I'm going to recommend that your direct supervisor be changed to Marcus instead of me. It removes me from your performance reviews and compensation decisions. You'll still work on projects I oversee, but the formal reporting structure will be different. You've thought this through. I couldn't sleep last night. I kept running through scenarios, trying to find the ethical path forward. Victoria's expression was serious. I need you to understand that this might still have consequences. People might judge us, might question your qualifications, or assume favoritism. I can protect you from some of that, but not all of it. I'm willing to risk it, Ethan said. Are you? Yes, but I needed to make sure you knew what you were risking too. They rejoined the group, maintaining professional distance for the rest of the retreat. But Ethan felt Victoria's presence like a magnetic pull, always aware of where she was in the room, whose laugh he could pick out in any crowd, whose opinion mattered more than anyone else's. The bus ride back to the city on Sunday afternoon felt interminable. Ethan spent it staring out the window, watching the mountains give way to suburbs and then urban sprawl, thinking about the conversation he'd need to have with Maya. She deserved honesty, but how did you explain to a 7-year-old that her father had feelings for someone new? That the world they'd built together, just the two of them, might be expanding? Mrs. Chen's apartment smelled like ginger and garlic when Ethan arrived to pick up Maya. He found her at the kitchen table, carefully folding dumpling wrappers under Mrs. Chen's patient instruction. "Daddy!" Maya abandoned the dumplings and launched herself at him, her cast bumping against his ribs. "I learned to make dumplings." "Well, kind of. Some of them fell apart." "The ones that stay together are delicious," Mrs. Chen assured him, smiling. "She's been a wonderful helper." They chatted for a few minutes while Maya gathered her things, then walked home hand in hand through the Sunday evening streets. Maya talked nonstop about her weekend, the movies, the dumplings, the board games Mrs. Chen had taught her. "Did you have fun at your work trip?" she asked as they climbed the stairs to their apartment. "I did," Ethan said carefully. "It was nice to spend time with my coworkers outside the office." "Did you see Miss Lane?" "I did." Ethan unlocked the door, trying to figure out how to approach this conversation. "Actually, Maya, I wanted to talk to you about something." They settled on the couch, and Ethan pulled her close, trying to find the right words. "You know how sometimes grown-ups become friends, and then sometimes those friendships turn into something more?" Maya looked at him with her sharp, knowing eyes. "Like when people fall in love?" "Yes, like that. Well, I've become really good friends with Victoria, with Ms. Lane, and I'm starting to have feelings for her that are more than just friendship." "Do you love her like you loved Mommy?" The question was direct in the way only children could be. Ethan took a breath. "I loved your Mommy very much. What I'm feeling for Victoria is different, but it's still real and important. Does that make sense?" Maya was quiet for a moment, processing. Then she said, "Is she going to be my new Mommy?" "No, sweetheart. Nobody will ever replace your Mommy. Victoria isn't trying to take her place, but she might become someone special in our lives, if that's okay with you." "Will you still have time for me?" Ethan's heart broke a little. "Always. You are the most important person in my world, Maya. That will never change. Having feelings for Victoria doesn't mean I love you any less. If anything, it means our family might get a little bigger. But only if you're comfortable with that." Maya leaned against him, thinking. "I like Miss Lane," she said finally. "She sent me the dragon, and she laughs real. And she makes you smile more." I do smile more when I think about her." "Then it's okay." "But Daddy?" "Yes?" "Can we still have our pancake nights? Just us?" "Every Sunday," Ethan promised. "That's our time. Always." That night, after Maya was asleep, Ethan texted Victoria. Had the conversation with Maya. She gave her approval, with conditions. Victoria's response came quickly. "What conditions?" "Sunday pancake nights remain sacred. Just her and me. Those conditions are completely reasonable, and I respect them deeply. She also said you make me smile more." "Do I?" "Yes. You make everything brighter. I'm really falling for you, Ethan Cole. I'm already there, Victoria Lane." Monday morning brought reality crashing back. Ethan arrived at work to find an email from Victoria marked urgent. Please come to my office at 9 a.m. We need to discuss next steps with HR and legal. Margaret greeted him with her usual warmth, but Ethan thought he detected a knowing look in her eyes. He wondered if she'd already guessed, if the way he and Victoria had looked at each other during the retreat had been more obvious than they'd intended. Victoria's office door was closed. He knocked, and her voice called, "Come in!" She was sitting at her desk with Catherine Reeves, the company's head of HR, and David Chen, their corporate attorney. Both looked serious, but not hostile. "Ethan, thank you for coming," Victoria said formally. "Please, have a seat." He sat, his stomach tight with anxiety. This was it, the moment where their private feelings became official reality, with all the complications that entailed. "I've asked Catherine and David here because I need to disclose a personal relationship that has ethical implications for the company," Victoria began, her voice steady and professional. "Ethan and I have developed romantic feelings for each other. Nothing has been formalized yet, but given our respective positions, I wanted to address the potential conflicts of interest immediately and transparently." Catherine nodded, her expression neutral. "I appreciate you bringing this to our attention, Victoria. Can you walk me through the timeline?" Victoria did, explaining how the feelings had developed gradually, how they'd acknowledged them over the weekend, and how they wanted to proceed ethically. David took notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. Ethan confirmed the details when asked, trying to stay calm despite feeling like he was under examination. "The biggest concern is the direct reporting relationship," Catherine said. "Ethan currently reports to you, Victoria. That creates clear conflict of interest around performance reviews, compensation decisions, and promotions. Which is why I'm proposing we change Ethan's reporting structure," Victoria said. "He would report to Marcus Webb instead. I'd recuse myself from any decisions regarding his employment or compensation." "That addresses the immediate concern," David agreed. "But we'll need to document everything carefully, create a clear paper trail showing that favoritism isn't a factor in any decisions regarding Mr. Cole." "I understand," Victoria said. Catherine turned to Ethan. "How do you feel about this arrangement? Do you feel pressured or coerced in any way?" "No," Ethan said firmly. "My feelings for Victoria developed independently of our professional relationship. If anything, I've been worried about putting her in an awkward position." "And you're comfortable with the change in reporting structure?" "Completely. I want to make sure everything is above board." They talked for another 30 minutes, working through the details. Catherine would draft a formal disclosure for Victoria to sign. David would create documentation around the modified reporting structure. Marcus would need to be briefed and agree to take on supervisory responsibilities for Ethan. The board would be informed at their next meeting. "One more thing," Catherine said, looking at both of them. "Office relationships aren't prohibited, but they do require careful management. You'll need to maintain professional boundaries at work. No public displays of affection, no preferential treatment that could be perceived as favoritism. And if this relationship ends, you'll both need to commit to continuing to work together professionally." "We understand," Victoria said. After Catherine and David left, Ethan and Victoria sat alone in her office. The weight of what they'd just done, making their private feelings a matter of corporate record, settled over them. "That was intense," Ethan said, "but necessary." Victoria came around the desk to sit beside him. "I meant what I said about doing this right. Your career and reputation matter to me. I won't let this damage what you've built." "I trust you," Ethan said, taking her hand. "We'll figure it out together." The news spread through the office with predictable speed despite their attempts at discretion. By the end of the week, Ethan could feel the shift in how people looked at him, some curious, some supportive, a few skeptical. Jennifer caught him in the break room on Friday, her expression warm. "So," she said, "you and Victoria." Ethan braced himself. "Yeah. I think it's great. You're both good people who deserve to be happy. And honestly, I've been watching you two dance around each other for months. I'm glad you finally did something about it." "You noticed?" "Everyone noticed," Jennifer said, laughing. "The way you look at her, the way she lights up when you walk in a room, not exactly subtle. But Ethan, you should know, there are going to be people who assume you're getting special treatment or that you slept your way into this job. It's going to be ugly sometimes." I know. We're trying to do everything right. I believe you. Just don't let the gossip get to you. You earned your place here, and anyone who knows your work knows that. The gossip did come, whispered in hallways and discussed in the bathrooms. Most of it Ethan could ignore, but one afternoon he overheard two analysts he didn't know well talking in the stairwell. "I'm just saying the timing is suspicious," one said. "He shows up out of nowhere with a mediocre resume and suddenly he's getting awards and dating the boss?" "Maybe he's actually good at his job," the other countered. "Or maybe he's good at other things." Ethan felt his face flush with anger and humiliation. He wanted to confront them, to defend himself, but he knew that would only make things worse. Instead, he walked past without acknowledging he'd heard, went to his office, and closed the door. His phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. "Someone just told me what happened in the stairwell. Are you okay?" "Not really. My office. Now." When Ethan arrived, Victoria was standing by the window, her expression fierce. "I'm going to address this at the all-hands meeting Monday. Make it clear that any disparagement of your qualifications or suggestions of impropriety will not be tolerated." "Victoria, that'll just make it worse. It'll make me look like I need you to fight my battles." "Then what do you want me to do? Let people question your integrity?" "I want to prove them wrong with my work," Ethan said. "The best response to gossip is excellence. Let my results speak for themselves." Victoria studied him. "You're probably right, but it kills me to watch people diminish what you've accomplished." "Welcome to what it feels like to care about someone," Ethan said softly. "You can't protect me from everything, Victoria. And I don't need you to. I just need you to trust that I can handle this." She crossed the room and pulled him into a tight embrace. "I do trust you. I just hate that loving me comes with this kind of cost." "It's worth it," Ethan said into her hair. "You're worth it." That weekend, Victoria came to their apartment for the first time. Maya had been asking when she could see Mrs. Lane again, and they'd decided Sunday dinner was the right occasion. Ethan spent all day Saturday stress cleaning and Sunday morning making lasagna from scratch, because he wanted everything to be perfect. Maya answered the door when Victoria knocked, dressed in her favorite purple dress to match her cast, which was now covered in signatures and drawings. "Hi, Ms. Lane," she said brightly. "Welcome to our home. It's small, but Daddy says it's cozy." "It's lovely," Victoria said, crouching down to Maya's level. "Thank you for inviting me. I brought you something." She handed Maya a gift bag containing an art set, high-quality colored pencils, sketch paper, and a book about famous artists. Maya's eyes went wide. "This is amazing, thank you." She looked at Ethan. "Can I show her my room?" "If Ms. Lane wants to see it," Ethan said. "I'd love to," Victoria assured her. Ethan watched them disappear down the hallway, Maya chattering nonstop about her art projects and her collection of stuffed animals. He heard Victoria asking genuine questions, making appreciative sounds, treating Maya's 7-year-old world with the same seriousness she brought to board meetings. They returned 15 minutes later, Maya holding Victoria's hand. "She has a dragon collection too, Daddy. Real ones that her grandmother brought from China." "They're jade sculptures," Victoria explained, smiling. "Much less exciting than Maya's dragons, but I treasure them." Dinner was relaxed and warm. Maya dominated the conversation, telling Victoria about school and her friends and the elaborate game she'd invented involving dragons and space pirates. Victoria listened attentively, asked follow-up questions, and shared stories from her own childhood that made Maya giggle. After dinner, Maya insisted on showing Victoria her favorite paintings, including several recent additions to the Daddy at Work series. Victoria studied each one seriously, offering genuine compliments that made Maya beam. At 7:30, Ethan announced bedtime. Maya hugged Victoria tightly before heading to brush her teeth. "She's wonderful," Victoria said when they were alone. "Ethan, she's absolutely wonderful." "She liked you too, I could tell." "How could you tell?" "She held your hand." "Maya doesn't do that with people she doesn't trust." Victoria's eyes were suspiciously bright. "That might be the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me." They sat together on the couch while Maya went through her bedtime routine, Victoria's head resting on Ethan's shoulder. When Maya called for her goodnight hug, Victoria stood to leave. "Stay," Ethan said, "just until she falls asleep, if you want." Victoria stayed. She sat in the chair beside Maya's bed while Ethan read the bedtime story, watching with soft eyes as father and daughter performed their nightly ritual. When Maya finally drifted off, they tiptoed out together. At the door, Victoria turned to Ethan. "Thank you for letting me in. To your home, to your life with Maya. I know that wasn't easy." "It was easier than I expected," Ethan admitted, "because it felt right. You fit here, Victoria." She kissed him softly. "I'll see you tomorrow." "Tomorrow," Ethan agreed. After she left, he leaned against the closed door, marveling at how much his life had transformed. 6 months ago, he'd been barely surviving, patching together existence from warehouse shifts and hope. Now he had meaningful work, financial stability, and a woman he loved who loved him back. It felt like too much good fortune, like the universe might notice and decide to correct the imbalance. But Maya's sleepy voice calling from her room, "Daddy, I really like Victoria. She's nice like Mommy was nice," reminded him that hope wasn't something to fear. It was something to protect, to nurture, to believe in even when it felt fragile. Ethan checked on Maya one more time, kissed her forehead, and whispered into the darkness, "We're building something beautiful, baby girl, something worth fighting for." And this time, he knew exactly what he was fighting for. Not just survival, but an actual future filled with love and possibility, and the courage to believe that good things could last. The belief lasted exactly 2 weeks before reality tested it with characteristic cruelty. Ethan was presenting the quarterly financial review to the board when his phone vibrated on the table. He'd silenced it, but the persistent buzzing during such an important meeting made several board members glance at him with disapproval. He ignored it, continuing his analysis of the Detroit project's performance metrics. But the vibrating didn't stop. Victoria, seated at the head of the table, caught his eye and gave a subtle nod. He excused himself and stepped into the hallway, his heart already racing with the premonition that something was wrong. 3 missed calls from Maya's school, 2 from Mrs. Chen, 1 voicemail. He listened to the voicemail with shaking hands. Principal Harris's voice, carefully calm in the way that meant the situation was serious. "Mr. Cole, Maya's had an incident at school. She's okay, but we need you to come immediately. She's asking for you." Ethan burst back into the boardroom. "I'm sorry. I have to leave. Family emergency." He grabbed his jacket and was halfway to the elevator when Victoria caught up with him. "What happened?" "I don't know. The school called. Maya's asking for me." His voice was tight with barely controlled panic. "I have to go." "I'm coming with you," Victoria said, not a question. "Victoria, you have the board meeting. Marcus can handle it. I'm coming." They made it to the school in 20 minutes, Victoria's driver navigating traffic with practiced efficiency. Ethan's mind was spiraling through worst-case scenarios. Another broken bone, an accident, something worse. Victoria held his hand the entire ride, her presence the only thing keeping him from completely unraveling. Principal Harris met them at the entrance, her expression grave. "Mr. Cole, thank you for coming so quickly. And Miss Lane, I didn't expect—" "What happened to Maya?" Ethan interrupted, not caring about pleasantries. "She's physically fine, but there was an incident on the playground involving some older students. Bullying, specifically targeted at her." Principal Harris led them toward her office. They were saying cruel things about her family situation, about her mother being dead, about you. Maya tried to ignore them at first, but when they wouldn't stop, she pushed one of the boys. He fell and scraped his knee. The other children called her violent. Ethan felt rage and protectiveness war in his chest. "Where is she?" "In the nurse's office. She's been crying for an hour and asking for you." Maya was curled in a chair, her face blotchy and her eyes swollen from crying. When she saw Ethan, she launched herself at him with a sob that broke his heart. "Daddy, they said terrible things. They said Mommy died because she didn't want to be my mom anymore. They said you only got your job because you're dating Ms. Lane, and that makes us bad people. They said—" Her voice broke into incoherent sobs. Ethan held her, fury burning through him like acid. "Shh, baby. None of that is true. None of it." "But they kept saying it, and everyone was listening and laughing, and I told them to stop, but they wouldn't, and I didn't mean to push Kyle, but he said—" Maya hiccuped. "He said you and Ms. Lane were doing something wrong, and that's why people talk about us." Victoria, who'd been standing quietly near the door, moved closer. Maya, sweetheart, can I tell you something? Maya looked up at her, tear-stained and miserable. Okay. People sometimes say mean things when they don't understand something, or when they're jealous, or when they're just being cruel because they can be. What those children said was wrong. Your mother loved you more than anything in the world. She didn't choose to leave you. She would have stayed forever if she could. And your dad got his job because he's brilliant and works harder than anyone I've ever met. Not because of me. But they said things that weren't true because the truth is harder and scarier. The truth is that sometimes terrible things happen to good people, and sometimes wonderful things happen that other people don't understand. Your family is different from theirs, and that scares them. But different doesn't mean wrong. Maya wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I shouldn't have pushed Kyle. No, probably not, Victoria agreed gently. But you were defending yourself and your family. That's brave. You just need to find better ways to be brave. Ways that don't involve pushing. Principal Harris cleared her throat. Maya will need to apologize to Kyle, and there will be a consequence for the physical altercation. But I want to be clear, the bullying behavior will be addressed as well. The students involved will face serious disciplinary action. Not good enough, Ethan said, his voice hard. Those kids were repeating things they heard from adults. This isn't just playground cruelty. This is a pattern of gossip and judgment that's affecting my daughter's safety and well-being. I want to know what the school is going to do to address the root cause. Mr. Cole, I understand you're upset. Upset doesn't begin to cover it. My 7-year-old daughter was attacked for things completely beyond her control. She was told her mother didn't love her. She was told her father is somehow morally compromised for finding happiness after grief. That's not acceptable, and I need to hear how you're going to make sure it never happens again. Principal Harris straightened. You're right. I'll be meeting with the parents of the students involved and making it clear that this behavior won't be tolerated. I'll also be addressing the broader student body about kindness and respect for different family structures. And I'd like to set up a meeting with you and Maya's teacher to create a support plan going forward. That's a start, Ethan said. They took Maya home, stopping for ice cream on the way because Victoria insisted that terrible days required ice cream. Maya sat between them in the back of the car, her purple cast resting on Victoria's lap, slowly calming down as they talked about everything except what had happened. Back at the apartment, Victoria helped Maya change into comfortable clothes while Ethan made hot chocolate. When he brought the mugs into the living room, he found them sitting together on the floor, Victoria showing Maya pictures on her phone of the Jade Dragon collection she'd mentioned before. This one is my favorite, Victoria said, zooming in on a particularly intricate green sculpture. My grandmother gave it to me when I was 8, right after my parents got divorced. She said dragons are symbols of strength and courage, and I'd need both to get through hard times. Did it help? Maya asked quietly. It did, because it reminded me that being strong doesn't mean nothing hurts. It means you keep going even when things hurt. Maya leaned against Victoria's shoulder. I tried to keep going today, but it hurt too much. Then you did exactly right by asking for help. That's what strength looks like sometimes, knowing when you can't do it alone. Ethan watched them from the doorway, his heart aching with love and fear and gratitude. Victoria had stepped so naturally into this crisis, not trying to replace Sarah, but creating her own space in their lives. And Maya, who'd been so carefully protective of her heart since losing her mother, was letting Victoria in. That night, after Maya finally fell asleep, Ethan and Victoria sat on the couch in exhausted silence. The weight of the day pressed down on them, the casual cruelty of children reflecting adult prejudices, the reminder that their relationship had consequences beyond themselves, the reality that loving each other meant fighting battles neither had anticipated. I'm sorry, Victoria said finally. This is my fault. If we hadn't, Maya wouldn't be dealing with this. Don't, Ethan said sharply. Don't apologize for caring about us. Those kids' parents are the problem, not you. The gossip and judgment we're facing, that's on them, not us. But Maya's suffering because of choices we made. Maya's suffering because people are cruel and small-minded, but she's also gaining something beautiful. She's learning what it looks like when adults handle hard things with integrity and love. You were amazing with her today, Victoria. You said exactly what she needed to hear. Victoria's eyes were bright with unshed tears. I've never been so angry in my life. Hearing what they said to her about Sarah, about you, I wanted to burn the whole school down. Welcome to parenthood, Ethan said with a tired smile. That protective rage is permanent. How do you stand it? The constant fear that something will hurt her? You don't stand it. You just live with it. And you do everything you can to give her the tools to handle it when you can't protect her. He pulled Victoria close. Which is what you did today. You gave her perspective and validation and comfort. That matters more than you know. They sat in silence for a while, processing. Then Victoria said, The board meeting didn't go well after we left. Ethan tensed. What happened? Robert Hartley. You know him, the one who's been skeptical about the social impact investments. He made some comments about how our personal relationship is affecting our professional judgment. Suggested that my leaving the meeting to go with you was evidence of compromised priorities. Victoria. Marcus defended us beautifully. Pointed out that I've never missed a board meeting for personal reasons before, that one emergency doesn't constitute a pattern, and that my commitment to supporting employees in crisis is exactly the kind of leadership the company should value. She paused. But Hartley's not wrong that this is complicated. We're asking people to trust that we can maintain professional boundaries while being in love. And today we literally left a board meeting together. Because my daughter needed me, and you chose to support that. There's nothing unprofessional about that. I know, but optics matter, and we're going to face more of this. More judgment, more scrutiny, more people looking for evidence that we're doing something wrong. Victoria turned to face him. I need to know you're prepared for that we're strong enough to weather it. Are you having second thoughts? Ethan asked, trying to keep his voice steady. No, but I'm being realistic about what we're up against. This isn't just office gossip anymore. It's affecting Maya. And if it gets worse, if the board decides our relationship is a liability, I might have to make some hard choices about my position. You can't step down as CEO because we're dating. That's insane. I can if it's what's best for the company and for you and Maya. I built Lane Enterprises to be something meaningful, but it's still just a company. You and Maya, you're real. You matter more. Ethan felt something crack open in his chest. Don't make me choose between you and your career. That's not fair to anyone. I'm not asking you to choose. I'm telling you that I've already chosen. If it comes down to it, I choose you. They held each other on the couch as the night deepened around them, both understanding that their relationship had reached a critical juncture. The initial romance had collided with reality, and now they had to decide if they were strong enough to fight for it. The answer came 2 days later, in the form of an emergency board meeting called by Robert Hartley. Victoria received the notice at 8 in the morning, along with a formal request that she address concerns about professional conduct and potential conflicts of interest arising from personal relationships. They're coming for us, she told Ethan when she called him into her office. Hartley's convinced enough board members that our relationship is a liability. He's pushing for a vote on whether I should step down as CEO. Ethan felt cold. Can he do that? With enough board support, yes. And he's been building that support for weeks, apparently. Using every piece of gossip, every raised eyebrow, every instance of us working closely together as evidence of compromised judgment. This is because I left the board meeting for Maya. This is because Hartley's always hated that I prioritize ethics over pure profit, and he's found a convenient excuse to try to remove me. Victoria's jaw was set. But I'm not going down without a fight. The board meeting was scheduled for Friday afternoon. Victoria spent 3 days preparing her defense, gathering documentation of every decision she'd made regarding Ethan's employment, demonstrating the firewall between their personal and professional relationships, compiling testimony from other employees about the company culture and her leadership. Ethan felt helpless watching her work herself to exhaustion. Let me help, he said Thursday night, finding her in her office at 9 p.m. surrounded by files and legal briefs. You can't. Your involvement would just make it worse. She looked up at him with exhausted eyes. Ethan, I need you to be prepared for the possibility that I might lose tomorrow, that they might vote me out. Then we'll figure out what comes next, together. What if what comes next is me being unemployed and unhireable because I chose love over career advancement? Then we'll figure that out too. Victoria, I've been broke and desperate. I've rebuilt my life from nothing. We can do it again if we have to. But I'm not losing you because some board member thinks our relationship is inconvenient. Friday arrived with leaden weight. Ethan tried to work but couldn't focus, watching the clock crawl toward 2 p.m. when the board meeting was scheduled. Marcus stopped by his office around noon. "I'm testifying on Victoria's behalf," he said without preamble. "I wanted you to know. I've prepared a statement about your work quality, the fairness of all employment decisions regarding you, and the company's improved culture under Victoria's leadership." "Thank you," Ethan said, throat tight. "Don't thank me yet. Hartley's brought in 3 other board members who are supporting his position. This is going to be close." At 2:15, Ethan's phone buzzed. A text from Jennifer. "We heard about the board meeting. The whole analyst team has signed a letter supporting Victoria. We're submitting it now." More texts came in over the next hour. From David, from other colleagues, from people Ethan barely knew, but who'd been touched by Victoria's leadership. They were all sending statements, letters, testimonials about what Lane Enterprises meant under Victoria's guidance. At 4:30, Victoria's office door opened. She emerged looking drained but standing straight, her chin up. When she saw Ethan waiting in the hallway, something in her expression cracked. "I won," she said. "Not unanimously, but enough." The board voted to table Hartley's motion indefinitely and issued a formal statement supporting my leadership and acknowledging that our relationship has been handled with appropriate transparency and ethics. Ethan pulled her into his arms, not caring who saw. Thank God. It was the employee testimonials that made the difference. Marcus said they started coming in during the meeting, dozens of them, from every department. People talking about what this company means, how the culture I've built has changed their lives. The board couldn't ignore that. Victoria pulled back to look at him. "Your colleagues went to bat for us, Ethan. For both of us." That night, Victoria came to dinner at the apartment again. Maya, who'd been anxious all week about whether Victoria would have to go away, hugged her tightly when she arrived. "Daddy said there were some mean people at your work trying to make you leave," Maya said seriously. "But you didn't let them win." "No, I didn't, because I had help from people who believed in what I was trying to build. That's the secret, Maya. You don't have to fight alone. You find your people and you fight together." They made pizza from scratch, Maya carefully spreading sauce with one hand while Victoria handled the cheese and Ethan managed the toppings. It was messy and chaotic and perfect, flour everywhere and laughter filling the small kitchen. After Maya went to bed, Ethan and Victoria sat on the couch, exhausted but triumphant. "I've been thinking," Victoria said, "about what happens next." "Okay?" "I don't want to keep our relationship in the shadows anymore. I don't want to worry about who sees us together or what they might think. I want to live openly, honestly, without apology." "That sounds amazing. But Victoria, you just survived a board challenge. Maybe we should—" "No more hiding," she said firmly. "We've done everything right. We've been transparent. We've maintained professional boundaries. We've handled the ethics concerns appropriately. If people still want to judge us, that's their problem. I'm done letting other people's small-mindedness dictate how I live my life." Ethan smiled. "Okay then, no more hiding. Which means I'd like to start introducing you as my partner, not just as an employee I happen to be dating." "I'd like that too." Victoria took his hand, her expression turning more serious. "I'd also like to talk about the future, about what we're building here." "What are we building?" "I don't know exactly, but it feels like family, doesn't it? You and Maya and me. It feels like something real and lasting." "It does," Ethan agreed, his heart full. "I'm not trying to rush anything or pressure you. I know you and Maya are a package deal, and I know she needs stability and consistency. But I want you to know that I'm all in, Ethan. This isn't casual for me. This is everything." "It's everything for me too," Ethan said, "and for Maya. She asked me the other day if you were going to be part of our family forever. I told her I hoped so." Victoria's eyes shone with tears. "What did she say?" "She said good, because she likes having someone who laughs real." They kissed, slow and sweet, and Ethan felt the last pieces of his carefully reconstructed life settling into place. He'd spent 3 years learning to survive alone, building a world that could contain his grief while protecting Maya from its full weight. But this, letting Victoria in, allowing their small family to expand, risking hope again, This was what actually living felt like. The changes came gradually but persistently over the following months. Victoria started joining them for Sunday pancakes, teaching Maya to make French crepes, and filling the kitchen with her laugh. Ethan's apartment filled with small traces of her presence: a toothbrush in the bathroom, a favorite sweater draped over a chair, books on the shelf that she'd recommended. At work, the gossip gradually shifted from scandal to acceptance. People got used to seeing them together, stopped raising eyebrows when Victoria stopped by Ethan's office or when they had lunch together. The quality of Ethan's work spoke for itself. 2 more successful projects, a promotion to senior analyst that Marcus insisted was based purely on merit, recognition from industry publications for innovative financial modeling. Maya thrived. The bullying incident at school had been addressed thoroughly, and she'd found a new confidence in standing up for herself using words instead of pushing. She started calling Victoria V instead of Ms. Lane, a small shift that felt monumental. And one night at dinner, she casually mentioned that she'd told her friend Emma that she had 2 moms now, one in heaven and one who's here. Ethan had looked at Victoria across the table, seeing her eyes fill with tears, and understood that they'd crossed another threshold. Maya was claiming Victoria as family in the way that only children could, directly, honestly, without the complications that adults created. 6 months after the board meeting, Victoria proposed a different kind of change. They were at her apartment, the first time Ethan had seen where she actually lived, and he'd been struck by how beautiful but lonely it felt. Expensive furniture, pristine kitchen that clearly wasn't used much, no signs of the warmth that Victoria brought to their small apartment. "I've been thinking about selling this place," she said as they sat on her balcony overlooking the city. "It's never felt like home, just a place to sleep between work." "Where would you go?" "I was hoping maybe we could look for something together. Somewhere bigger than your apartment, with room for Maya to have her own space and maybe a home office for each of us. Somewhere that could feel like home for all 3 of us." Ethan set down his wine glass carefully. "Are you asking to move in together?" "I'm asking if you'd consider building a home with me. Not right away. I know we need to take this at Maya's pace, but eventually, when it feels right." Victoria turned to face him. "I'm not trying to replace Sarah or change what you and Maya have built together, but I'd like to add to it, if you'll let me. Make something that's ours." "Yes," Ethan said simply. "Yes, I want that." They told Maya a week later over Sunday pancakes. She'd been decorating hers with strawberries and chocolate chips when Victoria said, "Maya, your dad and I wanted to talk to you about something important." Maya looked up, suddenly serious. "Okay." "We're thinking about finding a new place to live, somewhere bigger, where we'd all live together. How would you feel about that?" Maya was quiet for a moment, processing. Then she said, "Would I still have my own room?" "Absolutely," Ethan assured her. "You'd have your own room, bigger than the one you have now." "And we'd still have Sunday pancakes?" "Every week," Victoria promised. "That's our tradition. Nothing changes that." "Would you be there when I wake up from bad dreams?" Victoria reached across the table to take Maya's hand. "I'd be there whenever you needed me, sweetheart. Both of us would be." Maya nodded slowly. "Okay, I think that sounds good. But can we bring Mrs. Chen to visit sometimes? I don't want her to be lonely." "Of course," Ethan said, his heart swelling with love for his daughter's generous spirit. Mrs. Chen will always be family. They found a place 3 months later, a 3-bedroom townhouse in a quiet neighborhood with good schools and a small backyard. It needed work, but Victoria insisted that was part of the appeal. They could make it exactly what they wanted, build it together from the start. Moving day was chaos. Maya supervised the placement of her belongings with exacting standards. Mrs. Chen brought enough food to feed an army, and Jennifer showed up with the analyst team to help carry boxes. By evening, they were exhausted and surrounded by unpacked boxes, but it felt right. That night, after Maya was asleep in her new room, walls painted purple at her insistence, her art supplies carefully organized on new shelves, Ethan and Victoria sat on the floor of their bedroom surrounded by boxes neither of them had energy to unpack. "We did it," Victoria said, leaning against him. "We actually built this." "We did," Ethan agreed, "against some pretty significant odds." "Do you ever think about how we almost didn't happen? If Dr. Morrison hadn't recommended you, if you hadn't come to that interview, if I hadn't stepped forward to fix your tie, but we did happen, Ethan interrupted gently. All of those things aligned exactly right because they were supposed to. I don't believe in fate usually, but I believe in this. In us. Victoria turned to kiss him, soft and sweet. I love you, Ethan Cole. I love you too, Victoria Lane. A year later, on a Sunday morning that started with pancakes and ended with a backyard barbecue, Ethan and Victoria stood in front of their closest friends and family and made promises. Simple ones, honest ones, about showing up and staying present and choosing each other every day, even when it was hard. Maya stood beside them in a purple dress, holding the rings and grinning so wide her face might split. When the officiant said they could seal their vows with a kiss, Maya cheered louder than anyone, and Ethan felt something settle in his chest that he'd thought was lost forever, the certainty that he was exactly where he belonged. Mrs. Chen cried through the entire ceremony. Jennifer gave a toast about believing in love that transforms rather than just comforts. Marcus talked about watching two people build something extraordinary through simple courage and relentless honesty. And late that night, after the guests had left and Maya was asleep and the house was finally quiet, Ethan and Victoria stood in their backyard under the stars. Do you remember what you said to Maya that first night after the bullying incident? Ethan asked, about how being strong means keeping going even when things hurt. I remember. You taught us both that. How to be strong and vulnerable at the same time. How to hope again after loss. How to build something beautiful on top of broken foundations. Victoria rested her head on his shoulder. You taught me things too. That leadership means showing up for individuals, not just managing systems. That love doesn't have to be complicated to be profound. That family is built through choices, not just circumstances. They stood together in the darkness, two people who'd been shaped by grief and loneliness, and then reshaped by the courage to try again. They'd faced judgment and doubt, and the very real fear that loving each other might cost them everything. But they'd fought for it anyway, with transparency and integrity, and the stubborn belief that doing things right mattered more than doing things easily. Inside the house, Maya slept peacefully, dreaming whatever dreams 7-year-olds had, secure in the knowledge that she was loved fiercely by two people who'd chosen each other and chosen her. The purple cast was long gone, replaced by a scar she wore proudly as evidence that broken things could heal. Ethan thought about the man he'd been the day he walked into Lane Enterprises, desperate, grieving, barely holding his life together. He thought about the moment Victoria had straightened his tie, how that simple gesture had awakened something he'd thought was dead. He thought about all the small moments since then that had built into something transformative. Late nights working on projects, shared laughter over Maya's paintings, the day Victoria had sent her driver to take him to his terrified daughter, the phone call where they'd both admitted they were falling. None of it had been simple. None of it had been easy. But all of it had been worth it. What are you thinking about? Victoria asked softly. That I came to you looking for a job and found a whole life instead, Ethan said. That I'm the luckiest man alive. We're both lucky, Victoria said. We found each other when we both needed finding. They went inside together, checking on Maya one last time before heading to their own room. Ethan stood in the doorway of his daughter's room, watching her sleep, and felt overwhelming gratitude for every choice that had led to this moment. The hard ones, the scary ones, the ones that had required faith when evidence suggested despair. In the morning, there would be work and school and the ordinary logistics of life. There would be challenges still to face, moments of doubt, the ongoing work of building a blended family and maintaining the boundaries that let their relationship thrive. But tonight, in this house they'd chosen together, with the people they loved sleeping safely, Ethan felt nothing but peace. He'd survived the worst thing he could imagine. He'd rebuilt his life from ruins. He'd learned to hope again when hope felt impossible. And he'd found love in the last place he'd expected it, in a glass office tower, in the hands of a woman who'd fixed his crooked tie and seen past his circumstances to the man he actually was. The tie that bound them wasn't made of silk anymore. It was made of shared meals and honest conversations, of showing up for each other's battles and believing in each other's worth. It was made of Maya's laughter and Sunday pancakes and the daily choice to build something beautiful together. And it was strong enough to hold them all through whatever came next. Ethan turned off the light and went to find his wife, his partner, the woman who'd reminded him that broken things could be beautiful when put back together with love. Tomorrow, they'd wake up and do it all again. The ordinary magic of family, the extraordinary gift of second chances, the simple, profound truth that sometimes the best things in life came from having the courage to hope when every logical reason said not to. But tonight, he just held her close and whispered thank you to whatever force had aligned those moments in exactly the right sequence. The interview, the tie, the awakening, the choice to try again. They'd built something worth fighting for. They'd earned this peace, this love, this future, and they'd keep earning it one day at a time together.